But I want to start with the rules because it is a rather large, unusually large group. And for those of you who have been watching the presidential debates on TV, this is not going to be like that. First of all, because, yes, I am. First of all, because of the number of candidates attending, this is going to be a forum rather than a debate. Maybe even more like speed dating. We ask candidates, or better or worse, we ask candidates not to engage each other, but rather to focus on defining yourselves. We expect them to also be considerate of everyone's time. The time clock is straight ahead of you. Can you all see that okay? Great. And since we have so many candidates, we're going to hear from them in two groups. We have the first group up at the front of the room right now, and we're going to have two switches. The second group is going to do all of their questions and appearance at the same time, and then the first group is going to come back. It's maybe a little bit clunkier than ideal, but we wanted to be as fair as absolutely possible in not having one group ask all the questions, answer all the questions first. The order, I will note, also in the interest of fairness, was created by an online randomizer. We have several questions that we'll be asking all candidates, and time permitting, at the end of each group's final turn, we will ask questions submitted by the audience, which may or may not be directed to specific candidates. Bright yellow note cards have been handed out, and Katie Vogel will be coming around, and maybe somebody else at some point, and just pass your cards to the end of the aisle. Okay, to start, enough of the rules and regulations. To start, our first group will have 1 minute each to make an opening statement, and we will start with Senator Beagle.
Well, thank you for having me here today, and thank you for taking the time to attend. I'm Bill Beagle. I'm from Miami County. I reside in Tip City, where I'm a small business owner and a member of my local chamber. I'm married to my wife, Karen. She and I both have degrees from Miami University, where we met. We're a Miami merger. She's also a member of the local chamber. We have 3 children, one of whom is at Miami, the other at Toledo, and one in high school, and they're not members of the local chamber, actually. So, finally, I've been, over the last, my business profession, I've got a master's degree. I spent my time in management, in finance, in planning. I've had line and staff positions in corporate America, as well as my own business. And over the last 5 years, I've been serving portions of Montgomery County, portions of Darke County, Preble, and Miami County as a state senator.
All right, Ms. King.
My name is Terry King, and I live in Middletown, Madison Township, Ohio. I grew up there. I've been married for I don't know how long, forever. I have 2 children and 2 grandchildren. I've been an attorney for almost 30 years. I was a Butler County prosecutor for over 10, a Butler County juvenile court magistrate for over 3, and then I've been a criminal trial defense attorney since that time. The reason I'm running is because I've never seen our nation in the condition that it is in now. If I had thought when Obama was elected in 2008 we would be in this condition 7 years later, I would have said people were crazy. Although I did have some misgivings when I saw people crying around about him. I think everybody has that sense that if something isn't done in this election, we're losing our country. I honestly believe that. And it's an even bigger concern with the recent passing away of Justice Scalia. He was the conservative, one of the most conservative voices on the bench. Thank you.
Mr. Woolley.
My name is George Woolley. I am a resident of Troy. My wife and I live there with our daughter and her husband and 7 grandchildren. I'm a retired media producer and currently an investment property manager. Been an Air Force veteran from the Vietnam War era, where I was awarded the Air Force Commendation Medal and Airman of the Year for my squadron. I've got a bachelor's degree in finance, strong interest and a minor in economics. I work for the federal and state government as well, and now currently spend a lot of time volunteering for the juvenile detention facility as a Christian counselor there twice a week. I serve on my parish council. I've been a long-time activist in the pro-life movement and a long-time Republican activist, which has motivated me to run in this race because I really do feel the party has failed us.
Thank you. Mr. Winterick.
My name's J.D. Winterick. You might have heard of me before. I ran against John Boehner the last cycle, and I was doing it again this time before he resigned. And I did it because I believe he was burdening my generation by voting to fund Obamacare, voting to raise the debt ceiling, and other things. And I've been at this for a while, and I've talked to a lot of people, and there are three main things they say they want to see in a representative. They want someone relatable, they want someone who gives them hope for the GOP, the future of it, and they want a fighter. On the first point, I'm a former teacher. I work at a grain elevator, so it's a small business in the agricultural sector. These three things are very important to our district that I can represent well. Second point, I'm 34 years old. I'm passionate about my conservatism and about growing jobs in America. And I show you that conservatism isn't dead in the U.S. On the final point, I'm a fighter. I've proven it. I've gone against arguably the third most powerful guy in the world and survived. And this is something we need in D.C. right now that we're so desperately missing. That's why I'm asking for your vote March 15th.
Thank you. Mr. Sperlino.
Hi, I'm Jim Sperlino. I am not a professional politician. In fact, I've never run nor held an elected office. I am a husband, I'm a father, and I'm a business owner. My company, Sperlino Materials, was founded by myself in 2000. It's located in Middletown, where we employ over 100 people. I spent my career fighting for my company and the families of my employees. I'm also a community leader. Been active and still active on several boards nationally as well as locally, particularly around supporting at-risk families and their young children, trying to help these families become economically self-sufficient, as well as get the children on the right trajectory for school. And those are the type of things, the types of solutions that I find more compelling and more important to our country rather than expanding entitlements. I look forward to learning more about you all and having you learn about me at votesperlino.com. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. White.
America's best days do not have to be in your rearview mirror. My name's Kevin White. My platform is built on constitutional limited government and returning to the principles upon which our country was founded. I've got 6 tours in the global war on terror. I've been in 2 branches of military service. I've worked for a Fortune 500 company, international paper, and run my own business with my wife in town, Homestead Feed and Supply. 5 children, 3 here and 2 out in Colorado. Married 28 years. And you're here today because you're concerned about the future of your republic. I would submit to you that I have the strongest resume, background, and broad-based experience of anyone in the race. When you elect a member to Congress, you should elect the most dynamic and strongest leader possible to be your advocate in Washington. Find out more at kevinwhiteforcongress.com. Vote life, liberty, and freedom. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Mr. White. Mr. Mette.
I grew up in the Youngstown, Ohio area, graduated from Youngstown State University, a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. I'm also an Ohio CPA. I have owned my own CPA firm. I have done governmental auditing. I also have experience in healthcare, contracting, and currently I work in the steel industry. I am a non-politician. I am one of those people who's completely frustrated with the amount of taxes that we pay, the way government operates. I'm very concerned about the budget deficit, and more importantly, I'm really concerned about where we are today with job preservation and future job growth. There's many ways to fix this government, but we all have to attack it from both sides, both the revenue generation side and a cost reduction side.
Thank you. The first question is, what is the single most important issue for the 8th district, and what will you do about it in Congress? Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer. We'll start this time with Mr. Woolley.
I think other than national security, which affects all of us, certainly the lack of jobs in Ohio is a major concern. We need to be competitive with all the other 50 states, not only the other states, but also the other countries in the global markets. We are American companies have been leaving for the last few decades because our labor costs are so much greater than competing countries. That's something that individual businesses will have to negotiate with labor unions, but I am definitely a strong right to work person. I don't believe that you have to be a member of a union to work. We need to make county tax structures, rates competitive so we can attract businesses to the Ohio area.
Thank you very much. Mr. Winterick.
I would say national security is quite important to this district, as is the taxation problem we have in Washington, D.C. But you're going to hear a lot of conservative things today. All of us claim to be conservatives. We need to address the root of the problem, though. And the root of the problem right now is Congress itself and the congressional culture. And nothing we propose, nothing we do up here matters unless that culture changes. And we need to send the best person there from Ohio 8 who knows how to change that culture. And I'm that guy. I've lived in a socialist country in France. I've seen where they're trying to take us as far as healthcare, jobs, etc. It's just something we don't want for our country. We need someone there with a backbone. And, I know Speaker Boehner is well liked by a lot of people, but the fact of the matter is I believe he rolled over for our president. And we haven't had that representation that we deserve here. Thinking of all the business leaders I've met, you guys are strong people, and we haven't been represented that way in D.C. So yeah, national security is incredibly important to us. If you think about the border, securing the border, we have a huge heroin issue in our district. A lot of that comes up from the border, and we need to address this issue. We need people in there who have the backbone to stand up. And I've proven that I'm the guy who has the backbone to stand up and fight, regardless of the popularity of the issue. So that's, otherwise, I would say education is really important to us in the 8th District, and I'm going to work to get the Common Core aspect out and the federal government out of our local education.
Thank you. Mr. Sperlino.
I would say by far what I hear as I talk to the constituents out throughout the district is the economy and jobs. While folks have other concerns, I think this is the overriding concern that they come home to every night. And in particular, it's about taxes and regulations and getting this economy back performing the way we all would like it to perform. The federal government told us that the recession ended in 2010. Since 2010, this recovery has averaged 2.2% GDP. Ronald Reagan averaged 4.4. Even Bill Clinton averaged 3.8. This is not a recovery. This is an economy that is barely moving. And to get the economy back moving, we need to address taxes, both individually and corporate. Individually, we need a fairer, flatter tax system. Corporate, we need to be competitive with the world. And let our corporations bring their overseas profits back home. Let them bring it home free. Let them bring those dollars back to the U.S. and invest them here at home. Besides that, we need more work on regulation that is becoming completely burdensome to most of our businesses, to most of our small businesses where most people are employed. That would get the economy back started. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. White.
Well, small business and medium-sized businesses are the economic heroes of our system. We got a free enterprise-based system of over 200 plus years of the strongest standard of living, creation, wealth ever created in the history of mankind. So now we're faced with an assault on those systems that have brought us to where we are with great success, and that's the socialistic alternative that Sanders and Clinton and Obama would like to morph the United States of America into. National security can only be funded if the economy is strong. And if we don't have a secure country, we won't be able to operate businesses, hire people, we won't be able to expand. Businesses are on the sideline with their capital because there's so much fiscal instability and uncertainty. On my website, KevinWhiteForCongress.com, the only candidate with a 3-year tax and budget proposal that cuts the brackets from 7 to 4, cuts the rates across the board, abolishes AMT. It lowers the corporate to 22.5%, which is the middle 50th percentile. Leadership is on display when you put teeth to the rhetoric. That's what I've done in every single piece that's on the website. I'm not afraid to tell you what I'm gonna do about it, or what I would suggest when I get to Washington. It's your call. You have the right to know how we're gonna solve these problems, not just wordsmithing the conservative rhetoric that oftentimes takes place in primary campaigns. One brief example, right now, 9 federal agencies currently run 47 job training programs at a cost of $18 billion. We can do better.
Thank you. Mr. Matte.
I'll get very specific with you. One of the largest employers we have in this district is AK Steel. Last year they lost $500 million. They are faced right now with specific dumping happening with many various foreign countries that are dumping their surplus capacity into the U.S. because of our strong dollar. These trade cases that AK has proposed need to be addressed by Congress, and we need to do something aggressive. We have thousands of jobs of people that are working in this district that are related to not only that company, but provide services that, these are our consumers. These are people that are buying cars, that are spending money. We need to address some of the unfair trade that's going on in this country. Many of these cases are there because of what OPEC did to us in the oil and gas industry. OPEC intentionally increased their production levels in order to take away our domestic production. They have destroyed our fracking industry, everything that's going on. We have thousands of people being laid off in this country today, and we have got to address the fact that we are under attack, not only physically through ISIS and some of these other terrorist groups, we're under attack economically by countries that are supporting their positions economically by subsidizing and dumping it on the U.S. We have got to address these issues. This comes home. This is right in this district. We need to do something today.
Thank you. Mr. Beagle.
Throughout my travels in the district, we get a lot of feedback, but you bring it together in a main theme, and that is that Washington isn't doing what we have to do as families and what we have to do as business people, and that's live within its means. And we are a nation that has trillions of dollars in debt. We are paying a staggering interest cost on that debt, even at low interest rates. And we have a tax code that's convoluted, it's difficult to comply with, it's expensive to comply with, and it encourages people to avoid it. And you're seeing it through our tax conversions and other maneuvers that erode our tax base. And we need to shore up our financial condition so that we have the resources available to attack some of the problems that have been mentioned here, our national security, our workforce training, and other important priorities, not only just in the 8th district, but across the country. And we've worked hard in Ohio. We've been reducing personal income tax rates. We've been reducing business tax rates. We've cut small business income tax on the first, $250,000 of income by 75%. And next year, that first $250,000 will be tax-free in an effort to put more money into our business owners' pockets so that they can invest in growth and development and jobs, which just has a multiplier effect across the whole economy.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn. Excuse me, Ms. King.
Honestly, I believe that our number one concern is national security at this time. But with regard to jobs, the Obama administration has passed so many regulations that small businesses, especially the corporations are being over-regulated to death. My husband's a small business, of course, I'm a small business person. And they're constantly regulating us to death, and taxes are way too high. It's always a tax. There's a tax on this, so they want to add a new tax on the gas, since gas prices are lower, but that tax will just be passed on down to the consumer, which is wrong. So I support a flat tax of about, I would say 10% across the board. I also support job creation. Obama has stopped the XL pipeline that should be moved forward. AK Steel is bombarded by China dumping, any steel industry in the United States is being dumped on by China and other countries because we don't have fair trade. Fair trade is fair trade. That means if we do it one way, they do it the same way. Not that they get an advantage over us, and that's what's been going on. But we have a status quo in the Republican Party and in Congress that won't do anything. We've elected since 2008, every year of a Republican majority to stop the Obama administration, and what have they done? They've done nothing, and people are sick and tired of it, and that's why people are angry this election. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to switch up and let this first group take a break. Thank you very much. Welcome to the hot seats. You will have 1 minute for an opening statement, and we're going to start with Mr. Representative Derrickson.
Well, welcome to this forum. It's really it's a great slate of candidates, and I hope you're all encouraged by the folks and the comments that they share. I was born and raised here in Butler County, still live in Butler County, over in Hanover Township. We were dairy farmers there until I was 27 years old, graduated from Talawanda High School, from Clark State with an ag business degree, and from Miami University an administration degree. After I turned 27, the cows kind of left, and I went to work for public school systems around the state. I managed healthcare plans around the state for the schools, which was very enlightening for me. Years later, looking at the federal Obamacare plan that we have, what we manage with the school districts is the private sector approach to healthcare, which is something I like to pursue in Congress as well. When our first child was born, Katie, who's a Miami grad, Miami merger actually, we moved back to the farm where Kelly and I opened a furniture store, a retail furniture store.
Thanks. Sorry. Time right now. Mr. Muir.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ed Muir. Thanks for inviting me. A little about me is I'm from the White Oak area. I went to college at Cincinnati State and decided to join the Navy, became a parachute rigger. Our attitude is where others fail, we will not. And I came back home, went back into printing. I'm a Fluxo press operator right now. The reason why I'm running is I'm tired of the silliness of both Congress and our party in DC. It's like they forgot why we sent them. This is a job, and it's not a vacation or a power grab. It is a mission to protect and save this country. This party needs to return to the ways of Roosevelt and Lincoln, putting the people first, fighting corruption, and saying what they mean, doing what they say, and can't read my chicken scratch. And their job there is to serve the American people first and foremost. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Foister? Corey Foister? Oh, yeah.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey Foister. I am the only Democrat running in Ohio's 8th Congressional District, so I'm from the love. But we need to, the main theme that we keep on hearing is I'm the most conservative, but we need somebody who's bipartisan. And I think I would bring a bipartisan approach because we hear from the media and all over that we're so divided, but we're not, because cybersecurity, that is a partisan issue. When we get our identity stolen, we don't care, oh, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. We don't care. We need to address these issues. Infrastructure with the Brent Spence Bridge, we need common sense solutions to these issues. The environment, I'm the only one probably out here that believes in climate change, that it's real. We have to address the issues. We need to get off the social issues because all the time we spend on gay marriage and abortion, we need to address the real issues that the average American cares about. Thank you.
Mr. George, your opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Scott George. I grew up in southern Dark County on a small farm. I've been married for 11 years. I have a daughter who's 8 and a son who's 6. And we currently live in Monroe Township in Miami County. My wife and I are both very involved in our communities and in our church. I lead a strategic planning group for our church, and I coach a couple basketball teams, and we're both involved in the levy campaigns in our schools there in Tip City. And I've spent my entire career in business, so 25 plus years in business. I'm not a politician. I worked for a small privately held company that grew into a pretty good size one that was acquired by Procter & Gamble. So I spent another 13 years with P&G, and then additional 3 years working for a privately funded nonprofit that worked directly with small business owners. And so I take those skills and apply those in Congress. I'm running because, again, like many people here, frustrated that the voice of the people is not being heard in Washington any longer. And so I have the courage to stand up against our party and the other party or anyone opposing what's common sense solutions. These are American problems, not Democrat and Republican parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins.
Good afternoon. John Robbins, live on the road in Monroe, retired. Couple items I think would help improve things in Washington is taxes, create a system where everybody gets to pay. Not half, not 3/4, but everybody, 10%. You have income, you pay 10%. No deductions, no exemption, 10%. The budget needs to be brought under control. Several ways to do that. One is absolutely no yearly increase in the budget. Not only that, but a 1% decrease in the budget each year and each successive year until the budget comes under control and matches income. Another place
Thank you.
we could save a little money is
Thanks very much. You'll have time to talk a little bit more later. Mr. Davidson.
Hi, my name is Warren Davidson. Thanks for having me today. I'm running because John Boehner resigned, and largely because Hillary Clinton said, "What difference does it make?" I was inspired to run when I met Congressman Jim Jordan after commenting to a friend about Hillary Clinton's explanation and her questioning for her emails. This election is incredibly consequential. The difference is huge in this election, and it really is about ideas. A little bit about me. I grew up here in Ohio. I spent the last 15 years growing small companies. I've been married for just over 20 years. I have a daughter who's a senior in high school, headed to Cedarville in the fall, and a son who's a sophomore. I enlisted in the Army after high school, went to West Point, graduated with an MBA from Notre Dame. I'd like to serve. I appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Mr. Hammerman.
Thank you. My name is Eric Hammerly. I'm an American government teacher here at the Great Oak School District here in Greater Cincinnati. I have a bachelor's degree in history from the University of Cincinnati, a bachelor's degree in social studies education from Northern Kentucky University, and a master's degree from Xavier University in education. I want to thank the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber for hosting this event, for having the candidates here today. I say this everywhere on all these events, that I want to thank the candidates for being here too. You know, getting to know these guys, talking to these guys, reading about these guys. Regardless of what happens on March 15th, I'm confident about the future of the 8th District. My wife and I, Marie, we were both born and raised in Troy, Ohio. We both now live in Westchester, Ohio. We're raising 2 sons, 7 and almost 3. I appreciate you folks coming out here today to hear about the issues and to meet the candidates, because everybody in this room, we all want the same thing. We want to live in a safe, healthy, and prosperous district, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Okay, first question, as with the last group, is what is the single most important issue for this 8th district, and what will you do about it in Congress? You will have 90 seconds to answer, and we will start with Mr. Boyster.
Well, I'm a political scientist from Northern Kentucky University, so I don't think there's really one major issue. I think that there's a bunch of issues that really affect us, like the environment. I think that climate change is real. We don't really hear it around here that much, but it's really important. But we could actually lead. I believe that Butler County, and I would work for this every day in Congress if elected, I'd work every day to make Butler County the leader in Ohio in renewable energy and clean energy with solar power and wind power. And also, since this is Miami, since we're being hosted by Miami University, college tuition is outrageous. I'm only 25. And I'm running for Congress, but it's a major issue, and I think that we need somebody who just fresh out of college that knows the amount, how hard it is to have a job and to pay off tuition at the same time. And I want to be an ally for both. We need Democrats and we need Republicans to come together and bipartisanship and work together. And I personally think, I like what over to Ryan in Cincinnati doing, where they're bringing in a bunch of tech startups, and I think that would be great to have in Hamilton and Middletown, bring in a bunch of young students, keep the great students that we got graduating from Miami, Oxford, and have them lead the way in Butler County and across our district. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. George.
Yeah, so first I'd start with, we need focus. So the question was about what's the single most important thing. And for me, this is about security.
They're good for the Chinese and Indians and Brazilians. And in order to bring some jobs back to this country, maybe we should have them certify that they goods and services are made under the same rules and regulations that our business industry has to put up with. Can you imagine the price of things coming out of China if they had a $8.50, $9, $12, or a $15 minimum wage? The job, if the playing field is level, the rest of the business and industry in the world can't compete with American business and industry. But the playing field is not level.
Thank you. Mr. Davidson.
I'm Warren Davidson. I think the biggest issue is really the budget. And the reason is the United States has the only solution to fixing our budget problem is growing our economy. There's no way we can tax our economy to good health. There's no way we can tax our economy into job growth. I've spent the last 15 years growing manufacturing companies, from small companies, every little hurdle along the way. The tax and regulatory environment stifles that growth. We have the world's best markets for capital, for goods, for services, for intellectual property, but we do not have the world's best place to do business. And a large part of that is because of the complexity and the rate of our tax code and the complexity of our regulatory environment. So we really need to do that and drive our job growth. That's the key to balancing the economy, or balancing the budget. And the budget really is a math problem. Truly the most compassionate thing we can do is prevent the crisis that's coming by the rate of growth of the entitlement programs in this country and the rate of growth of service on the debt, the interest service on the debt. This kind of runs out in about 15 years. Beyond that, spending on the budget, several years ago, Admiral Mullen said the greatest threat to the United States national security wasn't global warming, it was the debt. So if we're truly going to defend our country and make that the priority it should be, we have to be able to fund our military. I love the country with a soldier's passion. We have to get this right. And it's related.
Thank you. Mr. Hammerly.
National security, the number one function of the federal government is the safety and the protection of the American people. The founding fathers knew that in 1787 when they mentioned defense more than any other government function in the Constitution. We need to first and foremost rebuild our military, bring our military back to world superpower status, and we need to take the fight straight to ISIS. There's a gentleman by the name of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He's the head of ISIS, and for the life of me, I do not know why he's still walking this earth. I'd like to go into detail about how we can combat ISIS without putting boots on the ground. If we don't act now and we're not proactive in dealing with ISIS, it's going to require boots on the ground. The first thing you have to do to combat ISIS, number one, is to go after their money supply. The caliphate will mean nothing if they have no oil, if they have no money. They're not going to fight if they have no revenue. The second thing in relation to national security is our border issue. The border is inconceivable to me, ladies and gentlemen, that we're still talking about border security 14 and a half years after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. There's some pretty unsavory things and some pretty unsavory people crossing that border every day, whether it be weapons, whether it be heroin, whether it be criminals, whether it be eventually radical Islamic terrorists. We need to secure the border for national security and protect the American people. That's the number one function of the federal government.
Thank you. Mr. Representative Jefferson.
Thank you. A good paying job is really the remedy for so many ills that we find ourselves in the population in this country. Free enterprise is a position that the Congress can really encourage, and indeed should be encouraging. Entrepreneurship as well. What we've found here in the state is we have as many people on public assistance as we do drawing a paycheck, and that has become a real spending issue, not only in the state of Ohio, but also on a federal level. Speaker Ryan has often referred to welfare reform as being a high priority to him, and it is to me as well. Now that is not a new subject, welfare reform, but it is one that we have some experience here in the state where we have encouraged folks to get off of public assistance into good paying jobs. Now it's not a simple fix, and it's certainly one that reaches far beyond education. What we're fortunate here is to have great schools, Butler Tech, Miami University, Cincinnati State, and others, who are providing the training needed. But really, it's more than that. What we we found is folks need more than just education. There are many hurdles that they face that keep them from obtaining a good paying job. And we have jobs actually available that are going unfilled by folks who are drawing public assistance that we simply need to help them get off that assistance and into a good paying job, which will help really strengthen the family unit that we once knew and help the incarceration rate and other issues that many in our country are facing.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
We have two major problems. One, on the national level, is debt. If we don't start doing something to fix the debt, we're not going to be able to go and bring the jobs in. And that's, the jobs issue is the biggest problem with the 8th District. I've driven around it trying to meet people, and I've seen what it looks like. And it is not a pretty sight. Maybe I just drove through the worst parts of town in Springfield and other cities in the state, but I mean, they should not look like that. And Hamilton is a city in particular that's lost all the paper industry. They used to be there, and now they don't have anything. The problem is there's no company that's going to want to come here until we fix our debt and make sure that they want to make sure they're not going to get taxed living daylights out of them when they come here. And the biggest problem because of all that is that Congress is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They should be in DC maintaining the country. That's their job. And that's why I think I'd be the best person to go there, because I spent my entire life maintaining equipment, tools, everything. I'm a guy who works 10-hour days as it is right now, and being asked to come in for overtime tomorrow because I took today off. So please, that's why I think I'm the best person for the job. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is, what is the most important foreign policy issue facing us, and what will you do about it? For those who answered foreign policy on the previous question, please talk about the domestic issue that you think is most important. And you'll have 90 seconds each, starting with Mr. Robbins.
Would you repeat the question, please?
What is the most important foreign policy issue facing us, and what will you do about it? If you spoke about foreign policy on the last question, you may talk about what the most important domestic policy issue is.
The most important foreign policy for us could be our immigration. The fact that any foreigner in any country in the world can walk into this country, the only country that has an open border. And if we can put a barrier between us and Mexico, it's definitely going to affect our relations with Central and South America and the Middle East. So the barrier is necessary, and then we'll work on the relations between our countries later once they realize that we're actually serious.
Thank you. Mr. Davidson.
Yeah, Warren Davidson, thanks. Foreign policy, as has been stated, is the first and foremost reason we have a federal government. We need to secure this country. National security is the defining issue in Washington, D.C. It's the huge distinction between what goes on in Columbus and what goes on in Washington. I served in the Ranger Regiment in 1998 when Kenya and Tanzania embassies were bombed by Al-Qaeda. Unfortunately, we treat that as a law enforcement issue. Law enforcement is very important for securing America, but you can't send the FBI over to deal with threats to national security that are outside our borders. You need to use lethal force. And obviously on 9/11, everyone realized the true threat that Al-Qaeda was to the world, really, and the United States in particular. Today, ISIS is that sort of threat. Just in the news today, they obtained allegedly some nuclear material. This is an incredible threat. We're not going to respond to this by ignoring the problem, by picking deadlines. Congress has to hold the President, the Commander-in-Chief, responsible for faithfully executing the missions that we've got. We need to defeat ISIS. We need to defeat jihadist networks where they are. We defeat terror networks not by fighting a terrain war. We defeat them by targeting the networks. And to do that, we really got to turn around the morale of the force. The morale has been decimated because we have not kept our promises to our soldiers, and we need to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Hammerling.
I talked about foreign policy in my first answer, so I'm going to talk about domestic policy. The issue right now with domestic policy is our national debt, our spending, okay? Everybody here knows that the national debt's approaching $19 trillion, and I've said it at every stop that President Obama's doing exactly what he's supposed to do. He's a tax and spend liberal. He just submitted his 8th and final budget with $503 billion in deficit spending stapled to it. With the Republicans controlling the majority in the House and the Senate, there's got to be a roadblock for this type of spending. We talk about Speaker Boehner. It's a slippery slope talking about Speaker Boehner. For 2.5 decades, a lot of shovels hit the ground in the 8th District, but at the same time, as I heard somebody mention, he rolled over and allowed these budgets to be passed. $503 billion in deficit spending, folks. With the majority in the House and Senate, there's got to be a roadblock, and that's got to be a government shutdown. Ronald Reagan had 8 government shutdowns and created 16 million jobs. Bill Clinton had 2 government shutdowns and created 22 million jobs. If we do not get the spending under control, it's going to affect our tax rate, it's going to affect our hiring, it's going to affect our expansion. All right, and in terms of jobs, as a vocational teacher myself, that's important. The only candidate on the trail right now, Marco Rubio, is the only one talking right now about the importance of career tech and vocational education. It's important that we focus here at home so that we can produce goods here in the United States, create more jobs, and expand.
Thank you. Mr. Representative Derrickson.
Thank you. Having traveled to Israel last fall, we went on an agricultural trade mission. And the purpose of that mission really was to promote agriculture, our leading industry here in the States. And while we were there, not only did we promote agriculture, and we have a very good relationship with Israel, but what we learned, kind of a sidebar actually when we went, was their security. And they freely shared what it was like to grow up in a state that neighboring countries really dislike them, really hate them, and how their budget, so much of their budget, 5% of their budget actually goes to defense. Bringing that back home and the concern that was raised to us while in Israel really brought home the national security issue that we have here with the growth of terror organizations. What Israel has been able to do is to attack that issue at home. What we should be promoting and be able to do is to attack that issue on their homeland versus on ours. We don't need to risk folks' lives here at home. Take it to their countries, take it to their home base, and protect our borders.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Our biggest foreign issue is the different types of attacks and the different combatants we are dealing with. We're dealing with economic warfare from certain countries. We're dealing with the extremists in the Middle East, and there's just a plethora of problems all over the place. Our government's answer for dealing with ISIS is drop a $2 million bomb on a $20,000 pickup truck. It's not going to help. They're getting the pickup trucks from us on top of that, which is hilariously silly. But we cannot afford to fight this kind of a tactical war in this certain way. We can't send ground troops in because every time we've done that in the Middle East, the neighboring countries have hated us for doing it, and we get more and more problems. We need to keep sending in special forces agents to train and support the local militias and local fighting forces, and then hopefully in time we'll be able to have them defeat these forces. Only by supporting them will we actually win. We ran into this problem with Osama bin Laden. We went to Kuwait. He didn't like us. He formed Al-Qaeda, and that's how we got into that mess. We need to actually pick the right ways to win these battles and to fight. And we also need to defend American industry. We ran ourselves into a hole with China taking away all of our rare earth metal jobs. I watched it fly, don't worry. And now we don't have any rare earth metal corporations in here to help us maintain and build the technological equipment that we need to fight in a super war. Thank you. 2 seconds.
Thank you. Mr. Boyster.
Well, I personally believe that every foreign affair that we have, we should approach with any conflict, we should approach with diplomacy and not with just outright war. I believe politicians are too quick to push the war button, which is very troubling. Over half of my adult life, we've been at war with Iraq. And I think that's just awful that this is the new norm, because people my generation and younger they don't know anything but war in the Middle East. So I think that we need to know what is our end game, because we can't force them to do what we want them to do, and we can't bomb them until they love us. So we have to come up with a common sense solution. We can't stay there 1,000 years from now. We have to get out eventually, but also at the same time, we have to do it in the right way. And I would not support putting any ground troops in, because that's just a big quagmire. And also, going back to what I said before, the environment. It doesn't matter about ISIS or anything. When a planet is unlivable, terrorism isn't our biggest threat. It's when our environment is unlivable, if the polar ice caps no longer exist, just pollution, and it just, we need to focus also on our environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. George.
Okay, well, first, if you don't know where you're going, any path will do. So the first thing is, I think Congress needs to unite with an America First mindset. We need to legislate with an America First mindset. We need a bipartisan foreign policy with stated goals. So we need to work together in Congress. What are our stated goals and what we're trying to accomplish? We need to develop strategies in conjunction with that. So what is needed, what has to be, what is necessary to achieve the desired state? And you do that in conjunction with the military as well, military leaders, so that we can then move forward with diplomacy where possible and the necessary force where needed. And so there's an area where I think it has to be the focus behind that. We also need to look at, when we do engage our military, the rules of engagement need to take the handcuffs off our military. They need to provide every advantage to our military. If we're putting them in harm's way, we need to set them up for success. So we have to provide those advantages. So ultimately, in the end, I'm a believer in peace through strength. I'm also a believer that the world is a better place and a safer place when America leads. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are now moving to the speed round. You're going to have 30 seconds each to answer this question. Can you name an issue that you would work across the aisle to address if elected? We'll start with Mr. Hammerling.
Again, immigration. I think there needs to be immigration reform, and I think that we can come together in a bipartisan fashion to work on immigration reform to maintain the national security of this nation, and to make sure that we're working here to create jobs. I heard a candidate a long time ago say, "I want to pick up a good product and turn it over and it says Made in America on it," and that's what our focus needs to be. And I don't care if you're blue or you're red. I think it's important that we create jobs here at home. Secure the border, create jobs here at home. For a stronger, safer nation. A strong economy also means strong national security.
Thank you. Mr. Derrickson.
Workforce development is certainly the subject that I touched on briefly earlier, but I do want to just elaborate as quickly as I can. That particular subject, helping folks out of poverty and in the jobs, has been a subject that, frankly, the Democrat Party has owned for quite some time. But the reality is, it's also very much a fiscal issue. It's a spending issue. What I have found and have experienced at this is bringing these two parties together with the ultimate goal of employing folks who are not currently employed.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Pretty much every policy I've focused on or been focusing on, I work with anyone across the aisle who will work with me. I work with everybody who will work with me. Everything I have come up with, every plan I have, is something that will make sure the Democrats don't have a reason to block it, and the extreme liberals won't block it either. You just have to do that. You have to come up with a plan to make it work. And when we get them to work with us, we become the victors in the end, and there's no reason to blame the other side for anything.
Thank you. Mr. Boyster.
Yeah, I would focus on cybersecurity. I don't think it's an issue that a lot of people focus on. It's not really getting any attention in the presidential politics, the race. So cybersecurity, because when you get your identity stolen, you don't care if a Republican or a Democrat helps you. And also infrastructure. That's another issue that nobody's talking about. And, nobody, when the roads are bad, nobody cares if it's a Democrat or Republican that fix it. So these are two issues that we could definitely address.
Thank you. Mr. George.
Right, for me, this is the economy, reaching across the economy. I believe there's no doubt in both parties that we have a struggling economy. And ultimately, in the end, I think there's two approaches to this. One is short-term, one is long-term. And short-term is certainly regulations. and working across the aisle to lift those regulations that are having the biggest impact on business, starting with Dodd-Frank and the ability to actually loan money to small businesses and being able to fund them so they can actually get out and build jobs within the communities in which we all live. So multiple other places to work, but that's where I'd start.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins.
When I think of bipartisanship, I think of Obamacare, where they had 57 Democrats, and then they bribed the one from Louisiana, bribed the one from Missouri, and bribed the one from Nebraska in order to get it to 60, and they told the Republicans, if you don't like it, there's nothing you can do about it. And that is the bipartisanship that is going on in Washington. It's not right, but the one with the most votes tend to have their way.
Thank you. Mr. Davidson.
Yeah, Warren Davidson, thank you. Fix the VA. Please, fix the VA. Everybody, fix the VA. Everyone talks about it, we need to do it. Be very serious about it. There's really no excuse for not fixing the VA. The last thing is, the relationship with Israel was always historically a bipartisan issue, and I believe President Obama did severe damage to it in the way he handled Iran. I thank Speaker Boehner for calling attention to a bad deal.
Thank you. Okay, we have time for, I think, one audience question that will give you 60 seconds apiece to answer if you have thoughts on it. What is the role of Congress, if any, in fixing the Brent Spence Bridge? And we'll start with Mr. Muir.
The role of Congress has always been to maintain the highways. That was their job. After they built the infrastructure, the interstates and everything, their job was to maintain it over the years. That's why they took all that money in for the gas tax. The problem is they went and spent the gas tax money on other things and other projects. So now we don't have any money. So now Congress needs, and the states themselves need to come together that use like I-75 and use that as the main fairway to come up with a way to come up with the money to pay for it. I personally think it should be a toll for the bridge. We build one bridge, we tear down the old, build a new one, and put a toll on it for just as long until we pay off the bill. Once the bill's paid off, take the toll off, and you go work on the next bridge.
Thank you. Mr. Foister.
20 seconds.
Mr. Foister.
Yeah, well, I think Congress definitely has a major obligation to address our failing infrastructure, especially, the thing is with infrastructure is it doesn't get a lot of attention, but it leads to tragedies. When it comes to, like, look at Flint, Michigan, with the pipes, we need to totally redo bridges, redo roads. It would create a lot of new jobs also. So definitely, I'm open to ideas of how to get it done, but we must get it done because I went to college in Northern Kentucky University, and I keep on hearing the politicians like, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that, but then nothing gets done. And it's like the bridge is not going to wait until politicians come together. So we have to act, and we have to act soon.
Thank you. Mr. George.
Yeah, so I fundamentally disagree that it's the federal government's job to take care of all roads and bridges. It is the federal government's job to take care of those that are strategic to our national defense, and I-75 is certainly one of those. And the Brent Spence Bridge is needed and been talked about for decades. And so ultimately, in the end, I think there's two things the federal government needs to do here. Brent Spence is being held up because of the EPA. We need to rein them in. And the second side of this is making sure that the funding is available so the state can actually move it forward. But ultimately, it gets managed at the local level and funded then by the federal government. But that is because it's strategic to our national defense and it's a strategic roadway. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins.
The main job of the people in Congress should be to look after the American people. And that means a strong military so that nobody fools with us. That means jobs. And in order to create jobs, the Congress should have the bureaucrats get out of the way so that the business and industry can create jobs. It's They should remove stumbling blocks. Instead of doing that, they create more and more and more and more jobs goes overseas, and we have less. They're just not looking after us. They're not looking after us.
Thank you. Mr. Davidson.
Warren Davidson. Yeah, the Brent Spence Bridge is, iconic. It's in need of repair, and it is an interstate commerce issue. The Department of Transportation has the funds to do a significant part of the work, but not the only part of the work. There's also some irreconcilable difference between the state of Kentucky and the state of Ohio. Governor Bevin just signed a bill that says we don't want a toll. Ohio does want a toll. Communities on both sides of the state borders have a lot at stake, and really growing our economy is infrastructure is a key part of that. We already take a fairly significant part of gasoline tax to fund our roads and bridges. In Miami County, we have a great local tax on roads and bridges. Our community takes it seriously, and we shouldn't pass every infrastructure project off as a federal project. This one is on an interstate highway. It crosses the Ohio River, huge navigable waterway, and we do need to rein in the EPA and get this project done in good order.
Thank you. Mr. Hammerly.
In September of 2011, President Obama landed in Cincinnati with the Brent Spence Bridge in the background as a backdrop, and explaining and talking about the importance of replacing that bridge. I know this because I took my students outside so that they could see Air Force One land. Well, since September of 2011, not one shovel's hit the ground to replace this bridge. Again, this is going to be proactive leadership, folks, or we're going to have a situation like we saw in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's an overworked bridge. It comes down to appropriations. Bottom line is appropriations. If we can come up with $2.6 trillion to fight a failed war in Iraq, $1.2 trillion to fund a failed healthcare policy and Obamacare, we can find the money to replace and enhance our infrastructure.
Thank you. Representative Derrickson.
Thank you. Thank you. As long as there's a federal Department of Transportation and federal highway bill, Congress does play a role in helping us replace this bridge. It is a heavily traveled bridge, artery for 13 states. Commerce is dependent upon this failing bridge. But I also see the states and local jurisdictions playing a role. We have, from a state's perspective, agreed that tolls, use fees would be appropriate. To some degree, it's arguable to what degree that would play or fund this particular project. But we do see Congress as playing a role as long as this is a federal issue. It's a federal bridge. It's typically servicing our entire country. Congress does play a role.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, all the candidates get to stretch their legs, and everybody else can too if you like. And as we switch again, grab your place cards.
Policy issue facing our country is leadership. I think we've all seen over the last years that our country's stature in the world has fallen. And I don't know that we're seen as the leader that we once were, if we are still a leader. I think there's a number of things we need to do. Well, number one is reestablish ourselves as a leader by building alliances. We can't go out and solve the problems throughout the world by ourselves, but we can by forming those alliances, bringing our allies together, and making sure that we address problems as a whole. Number two is we need to have a strong defense, and we need to project that. And we simply don't do that near as much as we used to, and we're starting to see some of those issues crop up. Particularly, thinking back to when Colin Powell and General Schwarzkopf were active in our country, they never went to war without overwhelming force. I think we need to go back to those ideas of if we're going to fight a war, whether it's with limited special forces or with ground forces or with our aircraft carriers or our Air Force, we need to do it with overwhelming force. And lastly, I think we need to make sure that we replace folks like Putin who have taken over some of the conversation in the Middle East. We need to replace them again with our leadership. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. White.
Well, the chief problem in our foreign policy is for 7 years we've had no foreign policy. This president kills the people that we should be capturing and then extracting information from. I've got 6 tours in the global war on terror, and I've been to every one of those desert vacation locations. The that you can think of, with the last two being in 2011. In Iraq, ground forces will be necessary, Democrat or Republican president that follows, you will see them on the ground, I guarantee it. In Syria, ground forces are not appropriate at this time. It's a quagmire, it's a hornet's nest, and the chief outcome to avoid is a proxy war with Russia. Less than 20% of your Congress are veterans, and no presidential candidate is a veteran. This president has not listened to his Joint Chiefs of Staff, and more generals and admirals have resigned or retired under his watch than any time in my memory can possibly tap hold of. I know these issues, I've seen the face of the enemy. Peace comes through strength. The Navy's mission is power projection. The Air Force can deliver strategic airlift and assets. Manufacturing in this United States of ours is critical to maintaining that infrastructure. The Air Force needs to craft in order to use civilian airlift to get the men, the beans, the bullets, and the women over there to fight those wars. Now, one last thing. They're not being honest with you when they say there's an end strategy. I'll talk more about that later.
Thank you. Mr. McVeigh.
Most foreign policy agreements center around trade agreements, and many times in the trade agreements, we don't take the time to completely analyze the terms and conditions to make sure that we are protected in the United States. And those terms and conditions create unfair trade agreements that turn around and catch us off guard, and we end up trading with somebody at below fair market value rates like we do with China today, and we do with many other nations. That needs to be dovetailed with information transfers so that we can protect the citizens of this country against these terrorist activities that originate in some of these countries. And finally, we need to not enter into trade agreements, such as we did recently with Iran, where it turns around and it freed up somewhere over $100 billion of funds that were held up in banks because of the sanctions, and now Iran is getting prepared to pump 500,000 to 1 million barrels of oil into the supply chain daily. And that has hurt our economy, that has stopped our domestic production, and that is going to help contribute to the problems that we have today from an economic standpoint.
Thank you. Mr. Beagle, Senator Beagle.
The biggest issue is, as many others have said, is fighting radical Islamic terrorism in the Mideast and eradicating ISIS. And it's going to take, a comprehensive strategy to do this. And it is going to take a total commitment on the part of this nation and our allies. And we're going to need our allies to do this as well. And, I can't rule out these of boots on the ground. But I think it's a failure of this administration to have set limits and communicated those limits and rule things out. Deadlines were mentioned earlier to tell our enemies exactly how far we're willing to go, and that has to stop. And you can't talk about national security without talking about border security. We do need to seal our borders, secure our borders. I know that from talking to people, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, about the need to find workers. We need to have an immigration strategy that works, so that we can bring in talent that we need, and while in the meantime protecting our borders and keeping our citizens safe in an increasingly dangerous world. And for the first time, we're seeing Americans become nervous about going to the mall and going to places, and that needs to stop.
Thank you. Ms. King.
Foreign policy in the United States has fallen greatly under President Obama's term. The number one thing is to secure our borders, and I agree with building a wall not only on the southern border but also on the northern border. Recently, Canada agreed to take in over 25,000 Syrian refugees. The majority of these are men of military age. They're well dressed, they're carrying cell phones. I don't see many women. But we cannot allow Islamic terrorists into our country anymore. We need to stop all Islamic immigration from all nations, unless they are Christian, Yazidis, or coming here because they're persecuted for their ideology. But if they're Islamic, they should not be coming here. Their culture does not conform with ours. We are a Judeo-Christian based country. Those are our laws. We are not to be operating under Sharia law, and that's what we see happening. We see a move toward that. There's currently 27 jihadist camps located in the United States. The FBI has not shut one down. President Obama refused to call terrorist attacks Islamic terror. Last week in Columbus, Ohio, a Christian Jewish deli was attacked by a Muslim. You've not heard it mentioned in the news. We need to stand with Israel. We need to protect America first. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Woolley.
Regarding our foreign policy, I'm generally, I've read all the books back in high school, 1984, Brave New World, afraid of a police state, but I think in times of war, which we are definitely in, although it's undeclared at the moment, we are definitely, there are people in countries hostile to the United States right now. We should be on a war footing. Our intelligence gathering apparatus needs to be increased astronomically. They're almost non-existent, apparently, when you can bomb the biggest buildings in New York City and nobody even knows that it's coming. So intelligence around the world, especially in the Mideast, maybe we could use some of the immigrants from that part of the region to join and be enlisted in our intelligence gathering and military services and serve over there. I am in support of the Arab coalition against the terrorists, and I support them. I don't think we need Americans to fight their war. We learned that lesson in Vietnam. When we turned over all the military equipment to the Vietnamese, they folded pretty quickly. So 52,000 Americans died fighting for people who wouldn't fight for themselves. I don't want to see us make that mistake. I would even support Russia. We did during World War II when they fought a common enemy, and they're fighting a common enemy now. We need to stop all immigration from all regions or countries hostile to America.
Thank you. Mr. Winterick.
So the greatest issue we have, foreign and domestic, is the pervasiveness of progressivism in our culture. If you think about what we're wanting to do up here, we're taking an oath to the Constitution to defend and protect the Constitution. There's a list of enumerated powers that we have in the foreign or the federal government that we can adhere to. So when we give up some of our sovereignty to the United Nations, that's not listed or an enumerated power within the Constitution. I'll give you a little story. I work at a grain elevator. The first couple of weeks on the job, I spent dealing with these burdensome regulations, but doing some digging, I found the UN came up with a regulation that they deemed appropriate for grain holding. Our OSHA decided to harmonize with the UN, and our Congress decided to go ahead and pass a law. It was signed into law by a president supporting what the UN was doing. We're not maintaining our sovereignty by appealing to this progressive side. If you think about academia, I've got 2 master's degrees, I finished the PhD coursework. It's monopolized by the progressive thinking, the progressive mentality. Their main goal is to implement social justice, and social justice defined by them is anything that eradicates capitalism and the Christian family. So when we put our kids to this educational system that's highly progressive, we're pumping kids out that don't know the work ethic or the right way, I guess, to approach businesses that you guys run yourself. So progressivism is the greatest threat we face.
Thank you. All right. We are to the speed round for this group. You're going to have 30 seconds to answer the same question as the other group. Can you name an issue that you would work across the aisle to address if elected? And we'll start with Mr. McVeigh.
One of the main issues that both parties have talked about recently has to do with the repatriation of foreign profits. A number of U.S.-based companies have created new tax-based homes that take them outside of the U.S. and therefore avoid the U.S. tax structure. The true problem in that is the fact that we have a tax code that's just not conducive to them doing business in the United States. We need to fix that.
All right, thank you. Senator Beagle.
There's opportunities to work across the aisle in the areas of economic development, workforce development, and just finding jobs for people. I've talked to many business owners, and they struggle to find workers, and that's a problem that I don't know that there's a single party solution to. We need to make sure that our workers are trained, that they show up on time, that they can pass a drug screen, And there's a lot of opportunities to work together on finding solutions to those, so we have a great workforce.
Thank you. Ms. King?
Well, I would be willing to work across the aisle with any of them that's willing to do so. But I'm not, if I would win this election, I would not go up there and kowtow to the Democratic Party, which is the Republican Party, who we've re-elected since 2008 and gave them a majority. Every time that Obama or the Democrats want something and holler, oh, we're going to shut the government down, they bend over and say, well, take whatever you want. That's got to stop. I'll work with anyone on all issues, but I'm not going to kowtow to anyone.
Thank you. Mr. Woolley?
I think we definitely need to work together as a country to reduce the national debt. It's catastrophic. It's in the near future, and it needs to be addressed. I'd like to see us work together, returning to an old Democratic program that FDR had started, where we, instead of mail people welfare checks, gave them jobs like in the WPA and the CCC. And I will never vote for an immoral or a law or legislation that's destructive to America.
Thank you. Mr. Winterick?
Working across the aisle, I believe congressional accountability is our best bet. The culture, the way it is, people are so fed up, which is why we see Donald Trump as popular as he is. We already have a couple candidates here accepting DC special interest money. I mean, they're not going to be beholden to us. The one thing the people want more than anything is congressional accountability, and that's the one thing we can force from our side, the people in Congress, to work across the aisles with.
Thank you. Mr. Sperlino?
I think some of the bipartisanship is really the biggest problem we all have with Congress. And whether I would serve in a minority or majority, I would attempt to work across the aisle on any issue.
Okay. Mr. White?
Specific issue would be the Cadillac tax provision on Obamacare. There's political capital right here, right now, in labor, management, corporations, and working families to get the provisions of the Obamacare heavy tax burden relieved, reformed. I do support full repeal, but we can get some things done right now. Warren's right, fix the VA, we have to do that. Let's raise the minimum wage naturally by stopping the influx of low-skilled workers into our country and let the free market dictate the wage.
Thank you. And for our audience question, we'll go back to the question we asked to the first group. What is the role of Congress, if any, to fix the Brent Spence Bridge? And we'll start with Ms. King.
Actually, I think Congress only has the duty to, with regard to fixing our roads and highways, would be interstate highways and Brent Spence Bridge, because it is part of the interstate highway system. However, I don't think that's really the duty and the obligation in any other area of roadways for Congress to get involved. That's up to the states. That's a state issue in my mind.
Thank you. Mr. Woolley?
When you say it's a federal issue, then you're talking about the taxing Ohioans, because we're all Americans. Our federal tax burden will be passed on to us, and if it's a state issue, once again, we're screwed there as well. I think we should address it more on a local level, on a state level, because we're not talking about just Ohio bridges, we're talking about bridges and infrastructure across all 49 states. I really don't feel comfortable about funding bridges in Alaska and in Maine and all the other places. I think we keep it local to address the needs of the community and pay for it locally somehow, some way. I don't have a ready answer as to whether a toll would be the best way, but I know that if we, the governors of the two states and the legislatures of Kentucky and Ohio get together, I'm sure we can come to an amenable, fair agreement as to how to repair this bridge.
Thank you. Mr. Sperlino?
While the Brent Spence Bridge is arguably the most important economic development issue in this area, Congress really has relatively little role in its actual construction, other than the important job that they have overall in oversight of the U.S. Department of Transportation. Thanks.
So they don't have a responsibility for funding it? Its repair?
They do through the highway fund, but the U.S. Department of Transportation is the one that's responsible for administering that.
Mr. White?
Well, we built a bridge to nowhere. Why the heck can't we build a bridge over here in Cincinnati? It's part of the interstate system. That has ramifications Eisenhower's built for national defense and interstate commerce. One thing we could do is cut foreign aid, which is supposed to be $36 billion this year. I suggest by 35%, and maybe reappropriate some of that money for American priorities first. This is a leadership question. We need to put pressure on the executive to carry out the law and fund the infrastructure that taxpayers pay for and support. There needs to be accountability, like JD said, and that's what we write our congressmen when we get on. I would do everything I could to try to get that thing in the rearview mirror so the bridge is complete and done. We do have a role, and we can do better. It's gridlock, more of the same is unacceptable.
Thank you. Mr. Maffei?
Well, the bridge, like any federal highway program, is covered under Department of Transportation through funding, and then there's a state match to those funds. So both states need to come to some sort of agreement exactly how they're going to make up the match, whether that be through a toll or through state participation. And the funding itself then could be procured from the federal government as part of the transportation system. So I do think the federal government does have a role in funding their portion of it, and we just need to work together and get it done.
Thank you. Finally, Senator Beagle.
There is a role to play for the federal government in the Brent's Bench Bridge project, and I think one of the key things is that the federal government has to work in cooperation with the states. The project is I think too big for local and states to fund, and so there's a role for us to play in that at federal level. But we need to, I think, respect the state sovereignty. Obviously, there's differences between what Kentucky thinks and what Ohio thinks in the area of tolling. And I've been supportive of tolls on the Ohio side to help our match. And we'll have to work out how Kentucky does theirs.
And my apologies, Mr. Winteright.
You just wanted to save the best for last, right? Constitutionally, we do have a responsibility to fund it with respect to, as was mentioned before, interstate commerce and our defense. All these ideas up here you've heard are interesting and good. Fact of the matter remains that whoever you send there is going to be 435 out of 435. You need to send someone there who can actually get this stuff done. And, I am someone who has proven that I'm a fighter who is able to get things done. If any of you followed what happened in Butler County with the endorsement process. We need people in there who understand how to deal with the other side. And none of this stuff will get accomplished unless we send the right people there. So, I'm a candidate of conviction, not of convenience. I'll get things done. I'll focus on what's right constitutionally, and that's what I'm asking you guys to do, send me there.
Okay, that completes our questions, and I want to really extend a thank you to all our candidates for being respectful of the time limits.